This circle represents the world of evolution, and this circle represents the world of creation. Both sides are arguing over the same set of data. So anything that both sides accepts as true cannot be used as arguments for that side. That is an invalid way of thinking. So many people say science disproves God, and nothing could be farther from the truth. Without God, there is no science.
There cannot be science.
There cannot be. We need an outside power, and we need something to create the human mind.
Something rational and personal to create the human mind.
Yes, something rational, not a computer.
All of this is about the reasons why each of us believes kind of what we do. We've looked at the assumptions behind the thoughts of both people who believe in creation and people who believe in a naturalistic worldview. So the question is, how does this actually help us have a conversation?
Great question.
When we start talking to people about biblical creation, there's a lot of words that get thrown around like anti-science, fundamentalist, conspiracy theorist, as soon as they figure out what we're talking about. So a big question that's in so many of our minds is, how do we go about explaining our point of view, biblical creation, to an evolutionist? And Dr. Carter, I know you've spent decades now as a scientist and as a Christian talking to people with very different points of view from what we hold here. So I guess the starting question is, why is it so hard to have conversations like this with people who disagree?
Oh man, there's a million reasons. Sometimes someone does not want to acknowledge that you might have a valid point of view. Sometimes they just refuse to accept that there's different ways of thinking. Sometimes, the person knows you and they don't like you. Or maybe they do like you and they just want to pat you on the head, say, nice shirt and have a good view. There's so much interaction between humans and psychology and emotion and philosophy, and there's no easy answer to that. So essentially, what I'm hoping we're going to do here is have the conversation that we always want to have but never seem to get.
So what do you mean by that? We want to have this conversation, but it doesn't happen.
Well, how many times have you been in a conversation when you thought it was going to go a certain way, and they either asked you a question you didn't anticipate, or they twist your words around, or there's some emotional thing that comes up, and you get angry, or they get angry, or frustrated. And so by having two people with the same opinion sitting across the table from each other, hopefully we can work through some of the issues so everyone can understand where the creationists are coming from and where the evolutionists is coming from. So essentially for our supporters and friends that are watching this, I think we're going to be able to bring out some important ways of approaching the issues to make the conversations a little more smooth.
And more productive as well.
And more productive, absolutely. Because we want to share people why we believe these things. And we don't want to appear to be kooks, because we're not. We have good, valid, scientific and philosophical reasons for believing what we believe.
Well, and so the question here, as we start to get into it, what are the key issues to keep in mind and maybe not keep in mind?
The key issue is that we're arguing over things that no one can prove. We're not arguing over the boiling point of water. We're not arguing over the force of gravity. We're arguing over, did some stumpy-legged fish crawl out of an ocean 300 million years ago and it's a way to evolve into people? We're arguing over things that no one was around to see. And so instantly we leave laboratory science behind and we get into historical science? Now I know that some of the evolutionists who have heard this phrase before, there's no difference between operational today science and historical science. Actually there is. In fact, there are guys who categorize it first. That what we do in the laboratory, things we can know, we can weigh something. I can weigh this cup on a scale. I know exactly how much it weighs. That doesn't tell me where the cup came from. I could even analyze the molecular components of this cup and say, it's got this much strontium and this much molybdenum. It must have come from a clay mine in southern Mexico or Cambodia. But that doesn't tell me how it was manufactured. So the history of this cup is unknown. The history of a fossil is unknown. We cannot know how old the fossil is, what led to its petrification and things like that. We can only make guesses. So essentially we're taking what we can learn today in science and trying to extrapolate back into the past. But can you see the further back in time you go, the less certain you can be of your conclusions? I mean, if a murder happened yesterday, we could probably solve it. If a murder happened 10 years ago, that's harder. What if a murder happened 1,000 years ago?
It's basically impossible.
Impossible. So we're trying to build stories of history that no one was around to see. So we need a guide to that. We either use biblical revealed scripture that gives us a history of it, or we use what most scientists only appeal to today, and that is a philosophy called naturalism.
And we're going to get into that in a minute.
Yeah, we're going to get into that really deep. In fact, at the end, I might even ask you some questions about it.
Okay.
Because I'm the nerdy scientist guy, and you're like the everyman guy.
Yeah.
And we probably relate to people differently because people expect me to throw out facts and figures. And both of our families, from our family history, I know that there's a lot of people who don't believe what we believe in our families. Mm-hmm. And so I understand that these are awkward conversations, and you understand these are awkward conversations. So let's help somebody. Maybe just turn the tables around. I'll interview you at the end.
All right. That sounds fun. Well, going back to what we were just talking about with operational and historical science, it sounds like basically everything that we have in operational science, we're going to share with somebody who believes in evolution. We don't that's why it muddies the waters when people call us science deniers.
Absolutely.
Because if you observe something in a laboratory, we're not going to say, no, you didn't see that.
True. And you're not going to there are cases of scientific malfeasance. There are people who have lied in science. There are some classic frauds that have happened.
That's true.
But putting all that aside, almost all scientific information is valid, assuming that there wasn't some bias in the data collection pipeline. So in my world in genetics, there's been a great frustration when I'm looking at a database. Well, there's a whole bunch of strings of DNA that someone has sequenced, but the machine sequenced it, and the machine might read some sequences faster or more accurately than others. And then it's been run through a pipeline where they filter the data according to some expectation of what they're expecting to see. And so then when they put the data together, now they have like a chimpanzee genome. It's not quite perfect. There's actually some human bias in the genome. Now, the newest ones are much better than the older ones.
Sure.
But basically, scientific data collection should be free of bias. A little bit of error, but it should be something both sides accept.
And the thing, too, about with bias, oftentimes it's assumed that bias has to be malicious. And that's simply not true, especially when it comes to data collection. It can happen purely by accident.
All human beings are biased. Every scientist, they're not some perfect human being in the ivory tower who makes no mistakes. They're literally the experiments they design fit their preconceptions because that's the way humans work. The data they collect, the decisions they're making, there's always some essential inherent bias in the scientific process. But that should not make all science irrelevant. It should not invalidate everything. It just means that we got to be careful when we read some number. That number might have a little bit of fudge in it that we're not even aware of.
So even acknowledging bias and things like that, though, we do generally consider scientific data to be valid.
Yeah.
So I've heard you use the two circles illustration, I know you like to call it, to illustrate how people who believe in biblical creation and people who believe in, we'll call it an evolutionary worldview. And this is an illustration that shows how we both approach data. Can you explain what that is?
Before I explain it, let me tell you the first time I ever used this in public. I was at a conference. It was called because there was a lawsuit that was going to happen. Here in Georgia, a science classroom showed a documentary or a movie where they openly mocked Christianity, which is illegal in the United States. The Supreme Court has said that all education must be religiously neutral. That's, so you can get God out of the equation, but you're not allowed to mock Christianity. And there was a Christian student there, and she said, this is wrong. And so she contacted her lawyer, and someone called a conference, and all these people had come and were working on different ideas. And I gave what I call the two-circle illustration. And afterwards, all these people lined up in front of a microphone to ask me questions. And the first person in line was Michael Behe.
Oh, wow.
Who famously wrote
Darwin's black box.
He's one of the grandfathers of the intelligent design movement. And he asked me a question and I answered it. We had a good rapport back and forth. It was a fun exchange. And he turns around and he's walking back down the aisle to his seat. He said, I can't get those two circles out of my head. I said,
You love it.
Yes, I got a winner here. And so I wrote an article, it's on creation.com, called How to Think, Not What to Think. It's how do you approach the process of learning things that fit into your Christian worldview or whatnot. And how do we assess data? In fact, after that, I've written several articles against conspiracy theory. Why CMI doesn't do conspiracy theory. And then Jonathan Sarfati and I have written long articles about flat Earth and geocentrism and things like that. But it's how to think. And what I did is I put up two circles. I said, this circle represents the world of evolution. And this circle represents the world of creation. And when I do this for my audience, I ask them, I said, is it true that every fact I find that fits evolution disproves creation?
No.
And is it true that every fact I find that supports creation contradicts evolution?
No.
No, why not? Because both sides are arguing over the same set of data. They're both claiming to explain a lot of the same things. So anything that both sides accepts as true cannot be used as arguments for that side. That is an invalid way of thinking.
It's not differentiating between the two if you're trying to argue for something they share in
over
common.
The same thing. So things that we share in common. Natural selection. Both sides accept it, therefore it's not proof of evolution. Species change over time. Yeah, species change over time, not because of evolution, because God designed them to adapt and change to changing circumstances over time. I've written long articles about that on creation.com. We're not arguing, we shouldn't be arguing over things that both sides accept as true. We have to get outside of the area of overlap, and that's where the evolutionist generally doesn't want to go, because we have to talk about origins. That's why CMI talks about origins so much.
Yeah.
Explain to me the origin of life, the origin of sexual reproduction, the origin of multicellularity, the origin of the human mind. In fact, probably 15 years ago, we had something called the 15 Questions for Evolutionists campaign. And those are all questions that we asked them. It's questions about origins, not questions about natural selection. So the similarity between humans and chimpanzees is irrelevant.
And explain why that is.
Because God could have created humans and chimpanzees as close to each other as he chose. He could have made us as similar to a rutabaga or an oak tree or a chimpanzee. Okay. That's not part of the discussion. It's not anything that the creationist or the evolutionist had a hypothesis about beforehand that can be tested. Nobody knew the genetic sequence between humans and chimpanzees. Nobody could even guess how similar we were. In fact, in the 70s, a lot of people arguing that orangutans are our common ancestor, not chimpanzees. We didn't know. And so after the fact, we're very similar, therefore evolution is true. Why is that? We got to be similar to something.
Yeah.
And if something kind of looks like humans and kind of acts like humans and eats the same foods kind of and has the same temperature requirements, I would expect them from first principles to be more similar to humans than a watermelon. Or platypus. So of course we're more similar. Area of overlap. We have to get outside of the area of overlap to really have the conversation. So origin of life, Mr. Evolutionist.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit.
Okay.
But we need to define a few terms here as we get started.
And what am I missing?
We are talking about science here. We're talking about how creationists do science and evolutionists do science. So what's science?
Most people in the modern world equate science with a philosophy. It's a philosophy called naturalism.
Okay.
In fact, if I say anything that's not naturalistic, you're not a scientist.
Yeah, we hear that a lot.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. What are you talking about? No, I'm not a naturalist. I'm a theist. I have a different philosophy. And if God is true, naturalism by definition is not. Naturalism essentially is a belief that nature's all there is, or that you can use natural processes to explain everything that's ever happened in the whole history of the universe.
Because that's all there is.
Because that's all there is. That's the only thing you're allowed in science is to use naturalism. But it's funny because the idea that we can trust the universe came from Christian philosophy and Christian theology in the Middle Ages.
Okay, explain that.
You can't do science if there's a Zeus. What if Zeus doesn't like you? He sends a lightning bolt down in the middle of the night and kills off half your lab rats. Did my cancer treatment kill the lab rats, or do the gods not like me? You can't do science if there's a Loki. You can't do science if there are pixies in the garden who might sneak in, crack in the window at night and rearrange the labels on your test tubes. If you can't trust the universe, science is impossible. We had to get rid of the paganism before we could do science.
So how is belief in Zeus or Loki or a trickster god or something, how is that different than what we believe? Because that's a very common thing that comes up.
Read the Bible. Start describing the God in the Bible. He's all powerful. He's all creative. He's constant. The old King James says there's no shadow of turning with him.
Love it.
Love that phrase. It's a cool phrase. God is not capricious. He doesn't change his mind on the whim. And he never does anything against his own nature. So if the God of law created a universe, he naturally would have created a universe that operates according to law. That's where the scientific revolution started. When the philosophers and the theologians started doing that, and the scientists said, wait a minute, let's go discover the laws of the universe. And that's where they came from. Boom, scientific law. But then in the 1700s-ish, a different set of philosophers got involved. Mm-hmm. And we had this period we call the Enlightenment. Okay, instant arrogance. To say, I am enlightened and everyone before me was in the dark ages.
Yeah.
Oh, really? The people that invented the universities in which you work were dark? Or the eyeglasses you're using to read, or the windmills that are grinding your grain? There was no dark ages. Mm-hmm. But that was the hubris of the day.
What C.S. Lewis would have called historical snobbery. I think it was him.
Yes, that's a good phrase. So what they did is they got rid of the God and kept the laws.
But what?
And then we have naturalism now. We have a set of laws that work, gravity and the speed of light and all those sorts of things. And then once you have laws, you can have naturalism. But naturalism is a great philosophy for the laboratory. It works really well.
Yeah.
I mean, when I run an experiment, I don't think God puts his finger on the scale to tell me how much something weighs. And the next day he decides it's way less or way more. No, the experiment's going to work out according to the laws of science that God wove into the universe.
And we get that because Scripture testifies to it constantly, that God is a God of order. I think I'm actually verbatim quoting the Bible there.
Yes. And he's a trustable God. The reason I trust the universe is because I trust the God of the universe. The reason I don't think a black hole is going to open under my feet right now, why would it? Why would God do that? God is a constant God, therefore science.
And that's the reason you can even trust your own senses, not just the universe.
Even Darwin wrestled with, if I have a monkey's mind, why would I trust it? I mean, consider humans evolving from a common ancestor of chimpanzees. What is the only thing that common ancestor is involved with? Finding bananas and finding a mate.
Yeah.
How does that tell us the structure of the universe? How does that tell us we can even understand the structure of the universe? If our minds have evolved, that raises serious problems with science. How do we know we can even trust our brains? But if God created our minds, if God gave us the ability to reason, to think, and reflect on our position in this universe and to wonder about how the things work, well, that's totally different. This is why we have flown to the moon and chimpanzees have never left the rainforest. Because we're created in God's image, we're different, and we have an ability to relate to God's creation unlike anything else.
Wow. I mean, there's so many directions that we could take that conversation.
Yeah, and we're totally off script also. Who knows what we're
There's so many directions, but let's continue the theme then of talking about naturalism.
Okay.
So frequently, and I know you've heard this more times than you could even count, when as a scientist you point to evidence of design and you say there's no naturalistic explanation for this, people will say, well, you're not a real scientist. That's the first
heard a lot.
rejoinder. Mm-hmm. And then, or people will say you're just dumb.
Yeah.
Like you just lack sufficient intelligence. You're brainwashed by believing in these Bronze Age fairy tales written by, and then they go off in a tirade.
The sky god or whatever.
And we get that a lot. So what do you do then when somebody approaches you with that?
Well, generally, I'm not going to let myself be baited that way because I am a scientist. I have worked in the academic world. I have publications. I have patents. I have a track record of intellectual pursuit. I don't think I'm dumb. I mean, everyone is, limited in their intellectual because that's
Sure.
just human nature. But I'm reasonably competent in a lot of ways. And when I'm arguing that something doesn't match naturalism, I'm not arguing from ignorance. I'm arguing from what we know. If all the
Explain that,
laws
yeah.
of chemistry and probability and physics tell us that life is not going to evolve from a warm little pond, I'm arguing from a scientific standpoint. Here's all the things we know, and that tells us that's never going to happen. So essentially, the evolutionist believes in bigger miracles than I do. I've got a God who can create. I have an outside power who creates the universe. They have an all-sufficient cause. They've got dumb luck, time and chance. When everything in chemistry is screaming that it's not going to happen, they've got to believe the impossible. In fact, I brought a quote with me.
Okay.
I brought two. This is one from Richard Dawkins. He wrote this in The Blind Watchmaker in his book, 1996. We can accept a certain amount of luck in our explanations, but not too much. The question is, how much? The immensity of geological time enables us to postulate more improbable coincidences than a court of law would allow. But even so, there are limits.
And so what he's saying there is that, and this is going back to the origins discussion, because this always comes up, because again, it's one of those things where we actually are opposed to each other. He's saying that you could not, in a court of law, prove...
He's saying it's indefensible. In a court of law, this is an indefensible position.
It's absurd.
It's absurd. However, given millions of years...
It must be true.
But even in millions of years, they don't have enough time. The improbability of what they're talking about is so incredibly ridiculous that even in was life 3.5 billion years ago, whatever number they put on it, that's not enough time. It's not enough time even for them. Because of everything we know about science, chemistry, probability, physics.
So then the question becomes, why do so many scientists, so many institutions, whether that's private institutions like a private university, or even public institutions, or even, dare I say, elements of our own government, why do they have such a strong commitment to naturalism?
Because the antithesis, or the opposite, the alternative, is untenable. If naturalism isn't true, Pandora's box opens up. Then anything could be true. It could be aliens. There could be a spirit called Gaia that's infusing the universe. Or there could be a God, like the God of the Bible, who actually created life.
Moreover, to whom all of a sudden we're accountable.
To whom we're all of a sudden accountable.
And that's
Absolutely.
a very uncomfortable thought.
A very uncomfortable thought. I mean, I've seen people railing against things I've written, and it automatically goes to sexual liberation. What? I'm talking about science. I'm not talking about your behavior patterns.
Except in a sense, you are. Yes.
Because if there's a God, then there's a God. And if that God is the God that we read about, oh my. I have another quote here.
Sure.
There's another famous quote. This is from Richard Lewontin, 1997, in an article called Billions and Billions of Demons. We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just-so stories, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. I'm going to skip a little bit. Moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a defined foot in the door.
And so it sounds like what he's saying there is we have a commitment to materialism and naturalism because we do.
Well, no, because if you don't, you might allow a divine foot in the door. And if you allow that divine foot in the door, then all of a sudden there's a God, and that God demands worship, and that God demands obedience, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there actually might be a hell waiting for people. Or heaven. And the naturalistic worldview, if I could call it that, has given people a way to completely cut God out of the equation. They think that, oh, I can explain where humans came from. We are just evolved fish. We're evolved, amoebas. We're evolved monkeys. Our behaviors are just contingent upon our evolutionary history. The thoughts in my brain actually are just pre-selected chemical signals that help my fish and monkey ancestors have babies. Literally, it can reduce to a purely mechanistic life, which is really depressing.
Yeah.
Because I know on the inside, all humans know on the inside, they're not just a machine. That goes back to the ancient argument: is there a ghost in the machine? The old Police album, "Ghost in the Machine," which I listened to many times as a kid. Yeah, of course there's a ghost in the machine, because the alternative is nothing. Humans know that there's a spiritual side to existence because God created us that way. Humans know there is something out there. They might not be able to identify him by name. They might not know the nature of this thing, but there's this God yearning in people, and we see it all throughout all history. Now, God revealed himself according to the Bible, which I totally believe. He revealed himself to people, and therefore now I know this God. And I want to tell other people about this God, but his evolution thing is getting in the way in a lot of ways, which is why I want to explain that we're not arguing over some statistic.
Yeah.
It's really, we're arguing over a philosophy and different philosophies.
Well, let me ask you a really big question. This is going backwards a little bit to the quote about allowing the divine foot in the door.
Okay.
Because once God is in the equation, anything can happen.
Yes.
Why doesn't that damage your ability to do science? I've heard you say, it's possible God could have created the world last Tuesday or something like that.
And filled our minds with false memories.
Yeah.
Now, that would not fit the nature of God. But given an all-powerful God, you can't exclude that. Or he could have created trillions of years ago. Or he could create it 6,000 years ago, like the Bible says. Once there is a God, then all things are possible. And then we have to start paring away the things that don't fit, like the world being created last Tuesday.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make any sense at all.
So it's possible, but at the same time, when we look at the way God has revealed himself in Scripture, we say no.
Yes, right. The appealing to the God of the Bible is a rational position. Absolutely rational. Once you allow the divine foot in the door. But naturalism is an assumption. It's a philosophy. And it goes along with, like Lewontin said, materialism. That's the belief that the material world is all that exists, that there's no spiritual side to anything. So that cuts off God right there. And that also goes along with an idea called uniformitarianism, the thought that everything happens at the same rate all the time, which is another assumption. And consider, you've probably seen some of the Marvel movies.
Oh, yeah.
And you got the alternate universes, the different timelines sort of thing.
It gets confusing.
and sometimes the laws of physics are different in those different universes. Well, if the laws of physics can be different in different universes, how do we know the laws of physics are always the same in our universe? How do we know the speed of light is always the same, the force of gravity is the same everywhere? We can't.
We're making an assumption.
We're making an assumption, a huge assumption. So we talk about Big Bang. Man, you're making assumptions about the entire universe that you cannot actually know.
Yeah.
That's where this conversation goes.
Well, and on the subject of the Big Bang then,
Okay.
the biggest difference, it seems then, between people who believe in biblical creation and people who have, again, we're calling it the evolutionary worldview. It has a whole bunch of other stuff wrapped in it. The biggest difference then is about creation itself, the origin of where life came from, right?
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people, even probably in this comment section, are going to want to parse out the origin of life and evolution and that whole worldview.
Oh, yeah. Evolution is not
them.
about the origin of life. Evolution is just about change over time once you have living things.
Yeah, that's what you'll hear.
Yep, you will definitely hear it.
So what do you say to that?
Yeah, it's a nice thought, but it's a brand new thought. For 150 years, they've been talking about chemical evolution. And all of a sudden, evolution is not part, or the origin of life is not part of evolution. But if you give up on that, Mr. Naturalist, you're giving up everything. If you can't explain where life came from, if you don't have a naturalistic explanation of life, what do you have?
The divine foot is starting to kick down the door.
Kicking down the door, yes. They've always believed in a continuum. All the way back to Darwin and his warm little pond quote.
Yeah.
Warm little pond with phosphoric salts or whatever. And, they need that. You can't just jettison the idea. You can say, we have big questions we haven't answered yet, or we have some interesting leads But you can't say it's not part of evolution, because definitely it's part of evolution, because evolution is naturalism applied to the living world.
And I've heard you say that was kind of the trend of the time when The Origin of Species was published. That people wanted to take this materialist perspective from the Enlightenment and come up with laws for everything.
Yeah, the zeitgeist of the day, back in the 1800s, they thought that they're gonna be able to make a law for everything. We had laws of chemistry, we had laws of physics, laws of optics, laws of biology. There are no laws of biology. Darwin thought he was making a law. Now, someone who argued against Darwin, Gregor Mendel, in his papers in German, he wrote the law of exponential trait recombination, which an article just appeared in our Journal of Creation, which is amazing, by Crompton et al. And some German scientists, and Nigel Crompton's here in the States. Amazing. I didn't even know this. But they're reading Mendel's papers, and he came up with a law of genetics. And it is a law. That is, if you have variation in a population over time, you get more and more and more homozygous traits, like blue eyes. You have 2 copies of the blue-eyed gene. I have 1 copy. I know that because I have 3 blue-eyed kids. So you have 2 copies. That is homozygous. But if you have homozygosity appearing, that's what speciation is. So Mendel was arguing that the laws of genetics naturally lead towards speciation.
And remind us who Mendel was.
Gregor Mendel was an Austrian monk who became the leader of his monastery, but he did a lot of experiments with pea plants, and he published just a couple of years after Darwin's Origin of Species came out. And he said there are laws in biology, and they're genetic laws, and they explain speciation. Darwin can never explain speciation. He can never explain what a species was. He failed to find laws. Now, later on, they were trying to bring up laws of psychology, laws of all sorts of different things. But living things, because they have agency, even a bacterium makes decisions. Not conscious decisions, but he's got little molecular sensors. Do I go towards the food, or do I go towards the light? Say swim one way or swim another. So even a bacteria makes decisions. Humans make decisions. And because of that, it's really hard to boil everything down to some mechanistic system that you can write a formula to. Now you can explain how many foxes and how many bunny rabbits you would expect on an island of 10 square miles. That doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It does not exist. And I was in the world of ecology. My training was in coral reef ecology. I left that field to go into genetics because I was utterly frustrated with the ecologists. They're trying to put numbers on God's creation, and none of them could do it. It's impossible because biology doesn't follow a nice formula. Now, again, we're way off track again, but that was kind of a fun little diversion.
Well, yeah, and something I do want to say, though, you're saying that they're trying to put numbers on God's creation and quantify things, and they're failing. I can already hear people saying, well, that's just an argument from incredulity, the old God did it, and now we can stop thinking. What would you say to somebody who said that?
It's like, no, it's from 200 years of experience. Life is complicated. In fact, the environment also is really complicated. So yeah, we can do all sorts of scientific studies, and I'm totally in favor of studying, the thickness of the ice cap on Greenland using satellite measurements. Very important stuff. But predicting the future is really hard because the environment is not simple, and living things specifically don't interact with the environment in a mechanistic way. They do things that are unpredictable. So that's all I'm saying. I love science. I love ecology for what it's worth. But putting numbers on it is hard because there's no laws anymore. Physics has laws. Biology does not.
Hope you're enjoying the interview so far. We'll jump back in shortly, but real quick, imagine bringing this life-changing message to your church or community. This is exactly what we do. We host almost 1,000 events each year, and our experienced and accredited speakers come to you without charging a set speaking fee. They deliver engaging, illustrated, and impactful presentations covering a range of topics dealing with the creation and evolution debate. We've received thousands of testimonies from people who have had their lives changed through CMI's speaking ministry. If you'd like that for your congregation or community, then use the link in the description and contact us today. Well, I want to bring this back around too, and
Okay.
to kind of highlight just the key points that we've been talking about, because it really involves a definition of science. Because people are going to say, you believe in God, you're anti-science. Well, science built the cameras that you're using to film this, and the computers that you're using to upload it to the internet and the internet itself. Therefore, you're a bunch of hypocrites, and I can turn this video off.
That's operational science.
Yeah.
It's not evolutionary science. It's not historical science. It's we can figure out how things work. Okay, consider this though. This is really funnier. What's light?
I mean, it's a wave and a particle, but I don't know where you're going with this.
What's gravity? What is electromagnetism? What are subatomic particles really made of? We harness all of these things. We use them all the time. We have not a clue what these things are. We use them. We've learned how to send, signals on a wire or through the air and have it picked up by some machine, but we don't even know what electromagnetism really is. And we claim we understand science. We claim we can understand the whole history of the universe, when at the most fundamental level, we're blind. We have formulas. We have conceptual models. And the conceptual models, sometimes, you can make a prediction, fill in the gap, like with the Higgs boson a couple years ago, the God particle. They filled in the gap. They predicted a long time before, and there it is. But what is it? I'm a scientist, and I don't even understand these things. We claim we understand the universe. We claim we can explain where everything started billions of years ago, and we don't even know what we're talking about. It's really funny when you put it in those terms.
That's profound. And yeah, I didn't know any of that. I'd been kind of assuming we had this stuff figured out. Like, what is light? Well, it's electromagnetic radiation. And I'll be honest, I was content to kind of let that be. But then once you start drilling down, things get weird and the
Really
questions
weird.
get bigger.
Yeah. And not only is existence weird, existence makes no sense.
Okay, what do you mean by
There
that?
should be no universe. And if there was a Big Bang, well, how do you get everything from nothing? But then again, you can't have an eternal universe because the second law says that everything would already had run out of energy by now, and would there be no even conversation here? We had an infinite old universe. That there must be an outside something, or else you can't have a universe. And what is that something? That something is God. Not in a Big Bang scenario, God the creator. Where's the human brain come from? Why do we have the ability to ponder God? And apparently no other species does. Why can we do all these amazing technological things that nothing else even comes close? Give a monkey a choice between two booths. One is playing Mozart and one's playing white noise. Which one will it choose?
I figure there's a 50-50.
It's 50-50. It's not, he doesn't prefer or not prefer. He has no concept of music whatsoever. And yet that's part of our daily lives. We have something different that was given to us that did not evolve. It was given to us by a God who wants us to relate back to him and respond to him and agree with him and believe in him.
And also a God who wants, and I've heard you say this, and I want to give you an opportunity to kind of expand on this, but a God who wants us to understand his creation. And this is at the heart of why we love science.
When a scientist makes a discovery, the scientist that discovers something that God hid in creation thousands of years ago, it is a privilege to be a scientist. It is a privilege to think God's thoughts after him, like Johann Kepler said, the great astronomer. It's a privilege to dig into the universe and discover scientific ideas and laws and facts and figures. It's amazing. It's also humbling though.
Yeah.
Because my God made that. It's shocking. It's amazing. It's actually, this is what motivates me as a scientist. If I was an evolutionist, why would I care? I'd want a paycheck because I want to eat. And I figured, I'm kind of smart, so if I go into science, I'll be able to eat the rest of my life. But what would motivate me to discover more? No, what motivates me is I'm literally looking into the mind of God. And that is the most amazing thing I could even think of doing.
I'll never forget in that same vein, I've always been a big lover of astronomy and space travel, everything. I just love it. But I'll never forget when I started to get old enough to understand, at least as much as we do, what we know about black holes.
Okay.
What they are, and then more recently, what they even look like. And I remember having this awe-inspiring, almost crushing moment where I began to understand how frightful a black hole is. And then I had another realization that my God made that. And it was one of the most profoundly humbling moments.
And some of the black holes that have been discovered are, I don't know the numbers, but they're so incredibly massive.
You can't get your head, not even set the size aside. You can't even get your head around the numbers describing the size.
Yes.
And
our God made that.
And it's a part of God's command to us.
To what?
To learn and to discover.
Going back to the dominion mandate in Genesis. Can I quote it off the top of my head? Be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and all the creeping things upon the earth. I think I got that right.
I think that's right, actually.
Okay, so have dominion means God gave Adam and Eve authority to take care of his creation. But to take care of it, you have to learn about it. You'd be a terrible caretaker if you didn't study what you're trying to take care of.
Yeah.
And the more you study, the more better you can take care of it. But the pursuit of study like that, that's called science. So our justification for science was given to us by God to the first human couple ever. And that's why we can pursue it and why science is a godly endeavor. Science is not anti-God. It's not anti-Christianity. It was actually mandated by God himself on the first day that humans were even alive.
That's powerful.
I hope so.
I'm sitting here reflecting on it for just a moment. It feels like the weight of everything that we've just been talking about and the importance of it.
So imagine now that this God of science who told us to do science and gave us the ability to do science, how does he look at someone who's using science to deny that God?
And
Ouch.
It's Romans 1.
Yes, Romans 1, but it's scary. I mean, so many people say science disproves God, and nothing could be farther from the truth. Without God, there is no science.
Yeah. There cannot be science.
There cannot be. We need an outside power, and we need something to create the human mind.
Something rational and personal to create the human mind.
Yes, something rational, not a computer.
Yeah, and not even some kind of abstract notion of a semi-conscious God like some people really seem to want to have, because it's, you're not accountable to that God, so it's a little more comforting.
Yeah.
All of this is about the reasons why each of us believes kind of what we do.
Yeah.
We've looked at the assumptions behind the thoughts of both people who believe in creation and people who believe in a naturalistic worldview. So the question is, how does this actually help us have a conversation?
Great question. And all the notes that we wrote down, all the conversations we had before this, and all the little rabbit trails we just went on as we left our notes behind was all designed to get to the question, how to have the conversation. So here's where we turn it around.
Okay.
Let me interview you. Right?
All right.
I'm nerdy, science kind of minded skeptic. And you're the Christian creationist at Thanksgiving. And I think you're dumb. How do we have this conversation? Or what if I don't think what if I'm your best friend for life? Or what if I'm Joe Blow on the street? There's all sorts of different scenarios that can happen. We want to converse all the time.
Yeah.
But in my own life, I find these conversations rarely happen.
They do.
They come either a curveball comes I didn't expect. I don't think I'm ready for anything. I'm like, well, what is that? I didn't think that's coming. Or I get shut down real fast. And usually I get shut down really fast because I think people are really uncomfortable with the thought of what might come next.
Profoundly.
And so that's where the insults come from, or the misdirection, or the redirection, or the, hey, have a great day. You believe what you want. I'm going to go play baseball now, or something like that. But sometimes I've had really successful conversations, real good heart-to-hearts. I mean, tears sometimes, or shouts of joy sometimes, or exclamations, I can't believe I never thought of this. That's what happened to me. I was a young punk. I thought I knew everything. I was a science nerd at Georgia Tech. I mean, no one could talk to me.
Yeah.
And I was over this girl's house. There's always a girl involved, right? And her mom was there. Like, who is this boy that my daughter just brought home? And I said, let's face it, evolution's a fact. And blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. And the mom wasn't going to take that sitting down.
And this is you saying
That's
this.
me saying this. Yeah, Mr. Future Creationist here. No, evolution was a fact. In fact, it's funny because that's exactly the words that my professor used in my first freshman semester in biology at Georgia Tech. He stood up there, he's talking, and he stops. And his blank look comes over his face, and he goes, let's face it, evolution's a fact. And then he continued with his conversation. And you know what I did sitting in the audience? I went, ew. And those words came out of my mouth the very next week. And she said, oh, really? And then she started asking me questions about things that she probably learned in like the Creation Answers book. That's the types of questions she was asking me. And I answered something, and then I answered, and then I wasn't so sure. And then I said, oh, but Pakicetus, the perfect transitional form between land animals and whales. Because back then, everyone thought the Pakicetus was this, half whale, half land animal thing.
I mean, you still hear that pretty often.
You do. But then she said, don't you know they discovered the rest of the skeleton recently? I didn't know that. And sure enough, the rest of the skeleton looks like a land animal. If you go on Wikipedia today, you type in Pakicetus, and you have a picture. It looks like a 4-foot-long rat dog with zero transitional features. It's got legs, it's got fur, it's got a tail, and yet the original picture had paddle-like flippers and a lot of artist imagination. I said to myself, I think I've been lied to. So that was an example of a successful conversation from the other side.
Yeah.
Here we have someone who she was a homeschool mom. I mean, she taught math, but she never went to college. She didn't know everything I knew. And yet God had prepared me prepared me for that conversation. So you don't know. She was a straw that broke the camel's back, and she didn't know that. She had no idea that was going to happen. It's always possible. There's always a chance of a successful conversation. So let's have this conversation.
Okay.
All right. What's the strategy?
Yeah. Well, I've had conversations like this too.
Okay.
Where I've gotten, and not nearly as many as you have probably, just full disclosure. But I have had good conversations. Okay. And the way that I go about it is largely determined by who I'm talking to.
Very wise.
And my relationship to them. Is
Very
this
wise.
My family member?
Hard.
Yes. And even then, how close am I to this family member? Is this my cousin who I see a couple times a decade? Is this another family member who's closer, who I maybe see every other weekend? Is this somebody who I live in the same house with? I've had those conversations. But that's step one. Determine who you are in relation to them.
Okay. One, great starting point. Okay. What's next?
Figure out where they're at in relation to this issue. And this is actually, in my experience, the bulk of the conversation, which I know me, and I know you've told me you have this problem too in having these conversations. I want to talk and share about all of the things that I'm excited about, especially with this topic, because we love to share things.
Yeah.
But you got to put that on the back burner first. This is like the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
then you feel guilty for not sharing.
Yeah.
Unless
you're
playing the long game. And you're doing it on purpose. You're waiting for an opportunity. You're developing a relationship.
Exactly.
If you're not hiding from it, and you don't want to use that as an excuse.
Certainly not.
Yeah, okay.
Well, but here's the thing. In my experience, when you sit there and just ask people questions about what they believe, no agenda behind it except taking the time to understand their position in detail, pretty much every single time, they will bring the conversation around to, well, what do you believe? I had this happen on a plane flight once. I spent a couple hours talking to somebody just about asking them questions about their worldview. And as the plane starts descending, she turns to me and she says, well, what do you think about all this? And we ranged all over social issues, evolution, the nature of the world. And as the plane's descending, I'm just like, okay, I have a couple minutes here to share the entire Christian worldview. And here's the thing, as frustrating as that can be, that sometimes, like you said, that sometimes you don't have the time to share everything you might be planting the seed that somebody else harvests.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a conversation. It might even be a spirited conversation or debate, especially if like I have great friends where we can enjoy a spirited debate with each other and have a good relationship. But it's a conversation. It's not necessarily an altar call. You haven't lost just because they didn't give their life to Jesus.
But
at the end of the
there is a time to
conversation.
make that altar call. There's a time to say, and now it's time for you to decide.
Absolutely.
Boom.
And and I've had those conversations too.
But usually not 30 seconds into a conversation.
No.
And the worst thing is the modern world's, the X phenomenon. 36 characters. Ha-ha! I won. No, man. He just makes you look like a jerk.
and that's something too, is the stuff that we're talking about. The best way to have these conversations is in person.
Okay.
Not in a social media post, certainly not firing off a one-off comment. Now, might that do a little bit of good and help change somebody's thinking?
Absolutely,
it could.
yes.
But it's more productive to do this with people with whom you have real relationships.
Which is getting harder in the modern world because electronics is replacing our relationships.
Well, we see community, the very concept of community unraveling around us.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go off on any tangents in that regard, but it does make it harder. But what if that also makes it more important?
Ooh. Oh, that got me.
Yeah, but seriously, I mean, people in so many ways have been raised with an essentially naturalistic perspective. Most people do believe in God of some kind, but
Okay.
I would say, or at least a higher power, they'd say.
Some kind.
Yeah, but they're effectively naturalistic. They don't believe in a personal God, and they don't believe that God has actually offered a solution for the problems in the world. They believe that they have to make one, that they have to forge one by themselves through whatever community they want to have. But of course, it's not a real community in so many ways. Oftentimes, it's an online group or something.
Yeah.
And my point,
for the younger crowd, it's the 5 or 6 friends you play shoot 'em up games with all night long.
Yeah.
3 times a week.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to go off on a tangent about the nature of society right now, but it matters because we're offering a perspective that has hope. And maybe that's the most empowering thing that you can take away from this if you're watching, that anybody can take away, is understanding that we are offering hope in a world that needs it. Here's the other thing. If you come at it with that perspective, you're not coming at it to win an argument. You're coming at it to win the person. That's going to change your perspective on how you have this conversation. It's going to change everything.
That's good stuff. All right, so in our strategies, we've identified 2 so far. 1, know your audience. 2, maintain friendships. You can't talk to someone if you don't have time to talk to them, right? You're not going to talk to anyone but the people you know. So audience, develop friendships. Give me a third strategy people can walk away from.
Number 3 is pray. Understand that this is a spiritual exercise before it's an intellectual one.
Yeah.
It's like the Apostle Paul says, we're not wrestling with flesh and blood here. And this is what he's talking about, by the way. We're wrestling with powers and principalities while we're in this present darkness. You're not gonna win by intellect.
No, especially against someone who's literally sold their soul for academic advancement. That person's not going to be, of course, I believe in God and creation. No, it's going to take a miraculous turning of that heart.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's why, so pray going into it and steep yourself in the Word. There's spiritual disciplines that we have as Christians for a reason. It's wonderful and important, actually, obviously, to know the evidence, like the physical, scientific evidence, so that you can converse about it. And because people are going to have they're naturally going to have questions. But here's the thing. The questions come after the conversation is underway. The questions come after a relationship has been built. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, they don't start asking the questions until you've been praying for them and working with them for a long time.
Okay.
And that I would say is the third point.
Those are excellent.
I think so.
All right, so the 3 take-home points for the audience. 1, know who you're talking to. 2, maintain and develop relationships. 3, pray.
Yeah.
But there's a 4th one, and I know you know this. I'm going to steal that book from you right now.
Okay.
That is, get yourself equipped. And so, for the watchers and listeners, we're offering a free copy of the Creation Answers book. This is a fantastic resource. I mean, I've read this. The first time I read this, my mind being blown. It's answering all these questions that I was asking. So essentially, many years ago, before I came on staff at CMI, which is 18 years ago, our scientists had listed out all the questions that they got. And they took the top 60 questions, which was 99% of the questions. And they put them into one book on purpose so everyone would have a single resource of answers for tons of questions. Like, what about carbon dating? What about dinosaurs? How do you get starlight here from outer space if the universe is only thousands of years old? All these questions that are going to come up in some conversations. And it's a great way to learn. So the Creation Answers book, I'd highly encourage all the listeners and all the watchers, just click on the link in the show notes, and it's going to come right up, free to download for you today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Carter. This has been wonderful.
Sheridan, thank you also. You added a lot to the conversation. I hope that we bless somebody with some encouragement.
Me too.